Hello, thank you for having me. I always feel a little bit awkward when I speak at a technical event like this on legal things because, legal things are boring and there is no denial to that. So, finding something that is useful and keeps the audience at least alive, if not entirely awake, is a major challenge. Therefore, I have picked up one of the most boring subjects I could possibly come up with: compliance. So, I confess, I tricked you into thinking I was going to speak about rhythm and blues songs. Or indeed, the subject is one of the most intricate subjects I could pick up. But fear no more. I'm not going through an endless list of things you need to do. I am going more to the root of it. Why do you comply or do not comply? One easy answer would be because I fear fines and damages. Or also because I would disrepute it if I will be caught. Or again, because if we are forced to do something when the product is already out, there will be much higher cost. All these answers include an element of fear, which is indeed a strong motivator. But does that tell the whole story? I submit it doesn't. But first, a question. How many chances do you have to ever get caught for not achieving perfect compliance? How many copyright holders do know what the conditions actually imposed by their own license are? And how many of them actually bother? Mileage varies, but the answer is, by and large, fewer than one will think. I have only anecdotal evidence. For instance, I and a client once found a very clear violation concerning a GPL library committed by competitors. And we told the developer, a PhD student from the US, that his library was distributed in software that was downloaded in probably millions of copies in Italy. But he was totally unimpressed and decided not to do anything about it. And of course, we, not being copyright holders, had no business with enforcing his rights. Many times, likewise, in a public list of Free Software Foundation Europe, where I do volunteer some of my time, we receive violation reports by non-copyright holders, and sometimes really hardcore, but nothing we could really help with. In all these cases, was it a wise decision to be in breach of the license? Considering the outcome, maybe yes. Or was it? Well, with the remarkable uplift in the use of open source, there are surprisingly few cases concerning free and open source licensing. When I'm recording these, I await the green light for announcing that we have settled the first, reportedly, case hitting a courtroom in Italy. Other major jurisdictions report one or two cases, some report none. What do we make of this? What are the reasons for this very little level of litigation? Well, Litigation and enforcement are a costly exercise. In some jurisdictions, an IP case is simply out of reach for many. But I believe this only provides a small part of the story. Compliance, perhaps incomplete and patchy, but in a good enough fashion, does exist. And more companies are getting more aware and sophisticated in compliance. Why? We are in a complex society. Motivation for compliance could be of different nature, but I submit it comes from observance of social norms. Punishment is rarely applied, rarely. But despite this fact, we are not going down the street robbing everybody and their dog. Neither do we enter and break shops and dwellings. There are rules that are complied because people feel this is the right thing to do. I concede there are parts of the society where these basic rules are not necessarily observed by heart, and deterrence must be there just in case. But after all, the very word normal comes from norm, or nomos in Greek. Therefore, according to the rules, indicating that what is in accordance with the rules is normal, and vice versa. In my observation, the most voluntarily applied rules are those which meet some basic requirements. They are simple and straightforward. At least the gist of it is. And therefore, they can be known and followed up without too much effort. They are reasonable and self-evident. Predicting if the rules will work in practice is seldom easy. But apparently, nearly all kind of open source licensing seems to fare well in this respect. Not just because open source is superior or better, not necessarily at least, but because its requirements, once explained and understood, are reasonable. Well, I'm telling you a story, which is in some ways surprising, on a totally unrelated subject: smoke ban in public areas in my own country. Italy has been one of the first to adopt a total ban in public areas, but in designated ones. When it was announced, everybody was concentrating on issues like who is going to make this law comply with, who is going to check. Announcements of disobedience were announced by some public figures. Almost nobody predicted an easy entry into force. Indeed, there was already a law dating back 1975 prohibiting more or less the same in the same terms, and more regulations followed up, all doomed with failure. In all restaurants, in all bars, in all pubs, in all public areas, it was impossible to find a non-smoking area. Moreover, the first day of enactment was January 1st. People were supposed to huddle out in the cold winter to get their shot of nicotine. No way. Skepticism was paramount. We all expected a swarm of litigation to put the law to a standstill. January 1st passed, and so did January 2nd and 3rd. all of the sudden we realize that everywhere, and I mean everywhere, people stopped smoking in public areas. In the middle of a cold winter, smokers indeed huddled outside. But inside, the air was clean and breathable. What does this story tell us? That if a rule is sufficiently clear and with limited exceptions, it is more likely to be followed, even in a culture where finding loopholes in laws is the second national sport. Second, making a rule work in practice implies making it socially acceptable. When it's socially acceptable and accepted, then you are somewhat compelled to comply because everybody else does. And this is what you are expected and expect others to do. As adults, we have learned that in order to be respected, we need to show respect unto others. And this is why I chose this title of this speech, Respect, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Not just because it's a wonderful song in one of my favorite movies, but because compliance, in a nutshell, means respecting and being respected. After all, what does compliance to open source licenses terms mean? It means my house, my rules. I am giving this for free, but I demand that at least A, B, C are respected conditions. The deal is clear. There is no hidden small print. You know everything you need to know beforehand. Then it's up to you whether to engage in this transaction or to leave it. What would be intolerable is that you take it anyway while openly ignoring the conditions. That would be disrespectful. Look, I hate all the intellectual property language as it's in you stole my intellectual property, instead of you trespassed on my rights. But since the legal deed for open source is some condition to receive the software for free, then using a word like immoral would not be very far from truth. How you showcase your respect? First, by acting respectfully. But of course, others could simply not notice, which is not necessarily a bad thing. After all, one does not get praised for being a decent person, does she? Another way is to pledge to something specific, something that runs the extra mile to show this respect. And this other action could be some hallmark of excellence, some commitment to a higher standard, something verifiable. This is the case, for instance, of formal programs, certification programs. One of them is obviously Open Chain, the Linux Foundation sponsor standard. But there are other programs that are worth noting, maybe less known or less far-reaching. For instance, reuse or clearly define. Already using SPDX in the bill of material and in the software headers rather than just natural language is a part of open chain process. But if everybody started with just announcing what their software is licensed under, in machine parsable way, wouldn't that be a good thing? Making a gentle move, making it easier for others to read through your technical and legal stuff instead of just roving legal documents and placing source code in a massive way just to make the cut. That is a form of respect. It's like having good handwriting. Mine is terrible, but I make efforts. Of course, people could read what you scribbled. Why making their life miserable and having your name cursed for the extra effort that this requires, when with a little bit of, respect, you could avoid it. So, by doing it and by announcing it and following your promises up with something recognizably useful, you would reassure your counterparts that they can rely on you and that you are, therefore, a respected member of the community. The more we all do it, the easier and normal it will become. And the more we will all breathe cleaner, unpolluted air. Thank you. And I remain available for any questions, especially what is Italy's first national sport. Thank you.